Check, check. Good morning, everyone. I think my mic is working now. Yeah, seems like it's good. Happy Wednesday, everyone. We're just gonna wait for a couple more of the participants. Give them a couple extra minutes, so take the time to settle in. Just start prepping on my end, so no worries, we won't get going for another couple minutes. Perfect. I'll remind you time and time again, but we have a comment section, right? A question section in GoToWebinar. Unfortunately, this app doesn't let us have a two-way communication with mics, but you can chat with me. So any questions, I just open the pop-up view of the questions chat. So please feel free to ask away if ever I show something or you want to dive a little deeper into a feature we go over. We had a little list of participants, so we're just going to wait to get closer to the number that I have here of signups, and then we're going to get going. We have a lot to go over today, so we will most likely be taking the full 50 to 60 minutes, so I don't want to waste too much time waiting. One last minute. I won't wait till the full 05 there, but we'll get going at 03, and then we record these and put them on our website. So if ever one of you have to leave and miss a part, you'll be able to have access to that. And then quite useless for me to tell others that aren't here to get the website because they're not there. Okay. It's not what I want. There you go. Put that over here. And should be getting up to 11:03. We'll start the introductions at least. So hi, everyone. Thanks for taking the time out of your day for joining us for this webinar. If you didn't catch the title of today's webinar, it is going to be on the account configuration. So we're going to sweep through the whole settings and make sure that everything is clear. We do have tutorials and other guides that you can follow along. So if ever, down the line, you don't remember something that went down today, you can always refer to our knowledge base that's directly on our platform. This is basically an owner's manual to Evolia. So just an FYI, if ever something, is forgotten, you still have a really good source here of knowledge. So let's dive right on in. Quick reminder, if anybody joined after I warned or after I stated it, there is a question section, so we can't chat, but please feel free to use that question section to communicate with me and to ask whatever you might have as questions. So as I introduced, the goal of this webinar will be to go through our entire list of settings here. So every field we will go over today. We're going to start off with the first one, top left, the general settings. Some of these get configured when you are creating your account. So if some of you, I might as well pop in here to show you, if some of you are on a free account or have started configuring your account because we have a self-serve wing to our platform, you have this guide that pops up that helps you kind of take off a little bit of that general settings list and a bit more of the account configuration. So don't be surprised if you go into your account and some of these things are already set up because you've already done so with that onboarding guide. Let's just go back into it. Let's say we'd be going in to make a little update, or just to make sure, double check everything is still good to go for our new year of operations or whatever the situation might be. So opening the general settings, the first page you'll get to is the company and the company info. Depending on your languages that you've set here, you'll have to enter everything once, twice, or 3 times, so that way it'll be translated for your employees. And that's why we have a tab here. So always French and English in our account. Strongly recommend you add your logos. That way it becomes more of a personalized work environment for your employees. When you invite them to the platform, they'll see your logo. When they're on their app and on the web version, they'll see clearly that it's their work account. So it's quite nice. This is quite self-explanatory. So depending on where you guys are situated, you'll be able to configure the time zone and then your date format, day, month, year. We can separate it in different ways, year, month, date, and then if it's columns or just dashes. So very, very straightforward as a setting there, depending on your preference. I like a 24-hour clock, but of course you can operate through AM, PM. So just a heads up there, all in your general settings from the company page. Quite straightforward. Let's skip on down to permissions. So very important here. The one who creates the account will by default be the account owner. That's what we have here. Of course, if ever this person changes, the proper step would maybe be to just change the account, like the user. So John Doe, let's say he would leave the company and a new owner would come and play. I can literally just give John Doe's account to that new employee, right? Or that new executive. So that way we're not restarting a new account, having a new owner. We're just gonna change the email address and then give it to that new person who's taken up the responsibility. Bit of a heads up there. If not, since this one's by default, we'll go into the ones that we can modify. So the account administrators, the supervisors, and the managers. Pretty simple to get as a concept here. You'll see a difference right off the bat between the administrators and the supervisors. Supervisors are assigned to a team, right? So if you're an account administrator, you have full access to what's going on in the Evolia account. The way this is operated or adjusted is quite simple. You can simply add a new admin if ever you need. These are unlimited spots, so you can have several admins. And then of course, once you select one, so let's just say Adam here, it'll be just detailing the permissions, right? So letting you know that this administrator will have access to everything. We'll take him off because he doesn't need to be an administrator. Once again, admins, access to the whole account. Supervisors, one step down. I like to call them or refer to them as mini administrators because they basically have administrative powers within the team that we've assigned them. So if they only have access to one team, they won't be able to manage the other departments we have or whatever the configuration is for this setup. They won't have access to the teams they do not have access to. So very straightforward. Once again, we'll use Adam as our example. You'll then have to define the team or designate a team, associate him to a team here. Very, very simple. And as you saw in the back, I'll do it here as an example. He can have multiple teams to his name, managing multiple departments, different branches, whatever the case may be, however we set up that account. Last but not least, our managers. So managers will be the last one on the ladder. The difference here will really just be confidential information. So much like a supervisor, they'll have to be assigned to a team, but they'll lose access to confidential information such as the salaries and different kind of contact info if we must hide such information. So very, very straightforward. It's really just a way of filtering out who has access to what info. The best example I often use is if we have someone that needs to validate the hours worked, but doesn't see the columns of the dollars to pay, they'll have to be a manager. That way you'll have a bit more restrictions on what they can see. That's page number 1, quite straightforward for the account setup. I'll try to remind you every tab there, but if ever you had a question on company, please make sure to use that comment section or the question section. Moving on to privacy, another pretty straightforward settings page. This is really just how you want the system to react, what you want to show or hide when it comes to employees or other colleagues. So of course, the first one, you can hide coworkers entirely, and the other options kind of disappear because we're just hiding everything. If ever we choose to show coworkers, then you get to decide within the information that can be found in Evolia, what do you want to show to other coworkers? What do you want to hide from other coworkers? Very, very straightforward. So like, let's say you guys use the open shift rules and there's invitations that go out. We can hide the other employees that are invited, or we can let the employee see the other colleagues that have been invited for that shift. Depending on the need, we show or hide. Same thing goes here. If we want to hide the contact information so the employees won't be able to see their colleagues' contact information, we can do so. It might be useful since we already have a chat feature, they might not need the contact information of their colleagues, so they can just keep all communication on the platform via chat, and then contact information can be something that's just seen by supervisors. It's really to your discretion. Schedules, depends on the need there too. If you want to have it hidden, of course, they'll be able to see with their coworkers that they're working with if that is not hidden. And then if ever they make time off requests, they can see who's covering, so on and so forth. Complete coworkers schedules again. So what you're seeing here is that you'll be able to see at least someone that's in one of their teams. So this will hide literally all the coworkers. If ever they have access to their coworker schedules, you can only show all of them or decide to only show the ones that they have one team in common with. It's just a different level of layering it out. Afterwards, you'll have coworkers availabilities and coworkers leaves. This could be neat, so that way they'll be aware of who's already off. Maybe they'll save their time off request for the next week since, maybe there's already 4 or 5 people off and they wouldn't want to send another one. So all a question of hiding or showing different information. And then in the privacy setting is also where you're going to find the chat settings. So if you want to hide conversations, this is really just disabling the feature. That way they won't be able to use the chat module, the conversations module. And then you could, if it is active, prevent it from being employees to managers. Managers will have to start that conversation with the employees or prevent completely between colleagues and just have it as a management tool. Different rules there. Once again, always to the discretion and how you want the system to react and how you want your employees to use the product. Afterwards, I do need to go over this because it's a very, very key feature with Evolia. This is something you'll find in the rest of our settings pages, but you can add a privacy rule. How this works here and what a privacy rule is that take note of all these rules here that I've set up for the whole account. Once I add a privacy rule, what I can do is select one of my teams. So just my finance team, let's say, or a division, of course. We're about to go over the account structure in a few tabs, but I can select a team or a division. And then as we saw in the back, all these hide coworkers, show complete schedules, all that good stuff will now be in the foreground, and I'll be able to select a different set of settings per this new team. So a really key feature in Evolia is our account structure, our organizational structure, because you can create settings per different structure, per different team, position, location. So you can have completely different environments in the same account. The reason I can't do anything about these two is because the administrator locked them, right? So I had made sure that if ever anybody wanted to tweak some settings, I locked these. So this is why there's a little lock at the end of every setting. Administrators can lock it so that way nobody else can kind of play around with the rules. So very, very important, not only just the privacy settings itself, but the fact that we can add different rules. And now it's privacy, but of course, if I go into the permissions page, it'll be add a new permission. So it's going to be the same list of rules that we've got here, but we're doing it just for one team or one position or multiple, depending on the need. So after that explanation, jumping over to permissions. Permissions are, once again, pretty straightforward. Every explanation is within the rule itself. So if you're not too sure how it's going to act, it'll explain it to you. This is very straightforward. So if there's an open shift and you want the approval on that assignment, the manager will have to approve. So it's very, very simple. This can be triggered on and off depending on the use case. So if you're creating an open shift, let's say it's a last minute need that you need to fill, you can take off the approval even though it's set in the parameters, right? Unless the administrator locks it. So just as an FYI, this will require approvals for any assignment. Afterwards, it's if we allow replacements or not. So if we allow it, then you have 2 extra settings to go through. The approval required. So you're going to see a very common theme every time we activate a setting. Do you want an approval for this gesture or not? And then once the this one is set, the next one will be for that replacement assignment. So how it'll work, do you want to be notified for the replacement request? Yes, you'll get a notification saying Jeremy can't make this shift. Do you approve this? You'll toggle accept, and then it's going to send invitations to the next person. Once that next person raises their hand, you can also set it to require an approval for the replacement. If you don't want two approvals, what you could also do is just have the approval at the last level, so that way automatically it's going to accept the replacement request, and then it'll find somebody, and then it'll show you, hey, by the way, we accepted this request. Jeremy's about to take the shift for, John. Is this okay? Depending on the need, depending on the management level, you'll have to go through this, either approvals needed or not needed, and then as you're seeing here, the different levels. So pretty neat. And then the next one down here are shift swaps. So shift swaps are pretty cool because what you can do now is not only just allow shift swaps, so enabling the feature, but we've added two features. So approval required for the shift swaps and approval required for the shift swap assignment is exactly the same as our request for the replacements. But if I go into the parameters of the shift swap itself, I'm going to go into a different tab so that way I don't lose where I am. The system now lets you set the shift swap itself in different ways. So there's swapping settings. You can make sure that no staff member between the two parties will go into overtime if one of them swap, right? So basically this will make sure that the list of employees that are shown as eligible for the swap are respecting their max hours. Nobody will go into overtime if this swap happens. And then of course you can set these little rules to allow swaps from people that don't work in the same position. So if that would be a situation, then, a bartender could switch with a server if ever that would be the case, depending on the need once again. And then of course, if ever that's not toggled on, the third one that keeps getting on and off is the score. So if some of you have been in the employee profiles already, we have a score per position setting. And then you can make sure that, like your 5-star bartenders are only going, 1 star down. So only your 5 stars and 4 stars can get invited, being 1 star less than the star that they already have, kind of thing. So it's just different ways of making it so that the system is not only suggesting people that are available for the shift swap, but also people that fit your qualifications for the shift swap. So very neat feature there. Since we're here, I didn't click on the settings for the replacement, but if ever you would need to, we can also set a delay, right? So if ever, you'd set like an 8-hour delay before a replacement request, that way, if ever anybody tries to pull a fast one the morning of, and this shifts in 4 hours, it's not going to work. It's going to block it, right? So this can at least help you from waking up to some tricky situations. Keep it to 1 day to make sure I'm not messing with my colleagues' demonstrations. And then we'll go back to our permissions page here. So swaps, just covered them. The next one down here is allowing them to have time entry creations or not. So once again, this is always just, are they allowed? And if they are, is there an approval required? So I can toggle on the time entry. This will allow my employees to go back in time, the good old pen and paper method, but now virtual. So now how it is that instead of, at the end of the week, at the end of the day, they're submitting their time entries on a good old paper, they're going to just submit a time entry virtually on their mobile app saying that on Monday I work 9 to 5 in this team, this position, this location, basically submitting a time entry to their staff. And then of course, approval or not, I would strongly recommend approval. So that way, anything that comes in unplanned, you'll have access to a notification and you'll be brought there. Just noticed that I've got a question here that came in 4 minutes ago. Let me address that before I keep moving on. 24 hours to AM, PM, would that affect the current account, such as conflicting current scheduling or with HR and accountants? This would only change what you're seeing in Evolia. So changing it from AM to PM is literally just changing the way that the hours will show for the employees and when you're creating the shift. So instead of creating a shift that will look from 9 to 17, it'll be from 9 to 5, and it's literally just that. It's just a visual effect for Evolia account. It's not going to affect your integrations with an HR or pay system. This is literally just the visual effect, how it will be displayed for your employees. So having that 24-hour clock versus the AM PM. Let me just go over that again. If ever you had schedules created in the past, it will correct those. So like, if you look at last week's schedule that was in 24-hour clock and you change the AM PM, it's going to switch now. But there will be no conflicts with your payments and your employees with HR and accountants. Yeah. Perfect. And if ever there is, please contact support. There really shouldn't be. It's really just a visual effect to make it a bit more user-friendly. And then back down to this one right here, since we had finished it, as I said, toggle it on, approval. Shift creation is very similar to the time entry creation, but instead of actually submitting a time entry, the employee can create a shift. So they can create a shift in the future. Of course, it'll be unplanned, so it's going to send a notification if you wanted to, right? So if ever they're allowed to do such a thing, do you want an approval required for this action? Yes, and then that way you'll be able to make sure that everything corresponds with what you need for the schedule. So shift creation, time entry, they're quite similar. Of course, the shift creation, though, is really just creating that shift, much like if you would be creating for an employee, but they're creating it for themselves. As I say themselves, I want to bring that attention there. They can create their own shifts. They're still at the employee level. They cannot create shifts for other employees, other colleagues. So clocking here. This is a really cool one. I recommend this often, depending, of course, on the need. I see a lot in restaurants, but how it works is you'll allow the employee to clock in without having a scheduled shift. So if ever you're stuck last minute, somebody called in sick or some shift was dropped for X reason, you can tell Jeremy to come in even though he wasn't scheduled, and he'll show up at his punch clock. He'll be able to punch in a shift without having a shift planned for him or her. And then, of course, once again, anything that's not planned by the manager will trigger notifications. So you'll need that approval required for any created shift, and then you'll get prompted to come and validate, adjust, or refuse that time entry or that shift that was created by the person that was requested to come in. So very, very straightforward feature. If ever we have time out of the settings, I'll show you how it works. It's really just punching in, and then the system will tell you that there's no planned shift. You want to create a shift and then have the manager validate it. Quite straightforward. Next one is the leaves. So employees can create leave requests. Once again, depending on how you're managing in Evolia, if you don't need paid time off management, it's as simple as toggling it off. But once this is on, once again, the system will ask you if you need that approval or not. Actually, I just put words in my mouth. This is really just a second set of settings that managers can approve their own time off requests. So depending on the need there, if you want managers to get approved by other managers, you would toggle that off. But this could be a very, very fluid process. They could submit and accept their own request. I don't think I have to bring your attention too much to this, but just to show you again, permissions is there. So you'll see the majority of our settings will let you set a general set of rules for the whole team, for the whole account, or if you need to be a bit more specific, you can be by department, by team, by position, by location. Notifications, quite simple, probably going to be the fastest tab. Disable or activate, very, very easy. And then you'll be able to define in your employee account. So in my profile up here, if I were to go into Jane Doe, I could decide if I rather email, push notification, or SMS, depending on the contract we've got going on. SMS, I think there's a bit of a fee involved. So please check in with your account reps. Security, really neat feature here. This wasn't always available to all. It was a upon request base, but now we've made multi-factor authentication enabled. Very neat feature here. How it will work once you enable it is that it'll ask you to set it up. I'll skip that for now because we're in the sake of this demonstration. Of course, now it remind me later. I put myself in it. But basically how it works is that it's just going to ask you to set up that multi-factor authentication, either it's an email or a phone number. And then once you sign in, it's going to ask you to confirm, right? Just turn that off to make sure. There are quite a few that use this account for demonstrations, and I could set somebody up for a bit of a surprise there. But essentially, if ever you were interested in this one, if ever we don't have time to go into it in depth, in our knowledge base, we have it. So multi-factor, quick little search here, you'll find a multi-factor authentication, how to enable it, and it's going to give you the steps here. So it might be a little outdated. We need to update these because of the background. But as you see, it's very straightforward in the sense that once you activate it, it's just going to show you, of course, which employees have it active and how they have it active. So is it by email or by phone number? You'll see a phone that they're doing their MFA, multi-factor authentication by phone. That's literally it. So the step that I skipped was really just setting up if I want it on phone or on email. So pretty cool feature. We're coming soon. I probably shouldn't say it, but we're coming soon. Very, 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 a lot of focus on, sorry, that wasn't good English there, but there's a lot of focus on single sign-on. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully going to be able to deliver that within the next month, I would say before the end of the year. So yeah, security there. Please don't take my word for that, by the way. It's really just a teaser. But yeah, so once we're done with security, we're jumping into the organizational structure. Very, very important. As you saw in the settings, we can have different rules per different structure that's needed. So just to give you a quick explanation of what we've got going on, an Evolia account can use 5 elements. So it's divisions, teams, positions, locations, and if needed, sublocations. A basic account usually uses teams, positions, and locations. So it really depends on what you need and how you need to like either report or just structure the whole account. But the brief explanation for this is really looking at the divisions I have here. We use one demonstration account to target the different industries we serve. So if I were to open my entertainment division, I'll find within that division the respective teams being, service and maintenance. And if I open my team, I'll find the management squad of maintenance and then employees, of course. And within that team, what's the other associations being locations and positions. It's very straightforward when it comes to the team position location. If we need to make it a bit more complex, as we're seeing here, we use the divisions and we make different kind of segmentation in the account. We can have different store branches, different units completely in the same Evolia account. And these are all tags. So when it comes to teams, positions, and locations, all the employees will have their set of qualifications. So I know that Francois is in the maintenance team. He's probably, I'm not really sure what pink is. I think it's a sanitary maintenance or whatever the case is, but basically they all have these tags in the account so that when we select a need for a shift, the system's going to tell you who's qualified, who's available. So this is very important to get right because afterwards our settings can be matched by structure. And then of course, something that needs to be stated is this complex structure with a lot of divisions and multiple teams is something that's accessible on the paying account, right? So if you're on the free version, you're going to have a bit of a star icon here to add a new team, to have multiple teams. That is something that's offered in the business plan or enterprise plan. So that's what we've got for divisions and teams. Of course, these are unlimited right at this point. So especially on a paying account. So if ever I wanted to add a new team, as straightforward as adding the team, you could set a different time zone per team and then the association. So what team, what positions, what locations are involved in this team. I'll just give it a bit of a name there and we'll set it here just to show you the next page. And then of course, it's French and English, we need to be fair. And then if ever we'd need for the integration code for an HR system, a payroll system, we'd have that field there. And then that little arrow down here would let you add new divisions, just an FYI. Beyond that, positions, also pretty straightforward. It's very self-explanatory as well. It's the set of skills, right, that you'll have to manage. So as you can see, we have construction workers, restaurant workers, all that good stuff in this account, but you can see the bus boys, beneficiary attendants, assembly line workers. It's really to the discretion of the user, whatever you need as a structure, as a skill set, you'll be able to create. So it's all custom fields. I'll use one that's already created actually, because then I get to just click around. So it's really just the custom field. If you use us for recruiting, you can of course set a job description, like a template of the job description. So that way, every time you post a new job offer, you don't have to write one up. It can have a default template and then you could tweak it per the need. And then of course, while you're creating a position, you can associate it to teams and you can enter members that are qualified for this position. And once again, in the advanced parameters is often where you're going to find integration codes, abbreviations for the different way you want it to show up on your schedules. So just the more behind the scenes kind of parameters here. The color coding is by position. So if your schedule needs to be tweaked to your favorite colors, it's really just a question of making sure that the positions have the right colors, and that way you'll see nice colors on your schedule tab. Locations. So this is pretty neat because we have that extra field that's a little hidden, but it is called sublocations. So if I take my work site here for my construction workers, you can see that, of course, work site A is the main work site. I just lost my screen here. 100% to save our eyes. Work site A has the address, all that good stuff, and then you can see that has sublocations. So for the example of my work site, zones, it could be projects, it could be really whatever you need, room numbers, floor numbers, as you wish. And then this just gives you a lot more detail to the employee. You'll have the address of where to show up and exactly what room, what floor to be on. So a fifth level of detail basically with the sublocation. If I were to just add that, since we went through the other ones, I'll edit one of these. Once you add a location, of course, if you want to use mobile time clock, which we'll go into quite shortly, you can set the parameter of that location, but we'll go through this a bit more in depth when we come to the time clocking tab. Once again, if ever we use Evolia for recruiting, we can set specific logos for specific locations. So if you're hiring, let's say you're managing 2 different branches that have completely different logos, you can have that set up so that way when you're publishing for branch A and versus branch B, they'll know exactly who they're applying for with the help of the location and of course a different logo. This is a neat one, brand new feature of about a month or 2 old now. So qualifications management will help us make sure that the employee is not just qualified when it comes to our standards being team, position, location that's needed, but if ever they need any kind of certifications or trainings or whatever the case may be when it comes to different qualifications, they can have this now set in their account. The very standard examples we have are just the CPR certifications. Very, very straightforward example, but this can be up to anything when it comes to certifications, education, language, other very, very vague fields. So to your discretion. And then trainings. And how it works is that you'll link this to your structure if you want it to act automatically, right? So if ever I create a shift for my sales team with the position of sales reps at this location, automatically my qualifications of CPR certification will kick into the shift. Anybody that doesn't have this active qualification in their account will be disregarded for the invitation list. So the system's only going to show me now the employees that fit the exact need, being team, position, location, and CPR certified. So it depends on how you want it to act. I don't like it acting automatically because it's a demonstration account, but if it's something that's an absolute must, then you just toggle on the apply automatically. And every time you create this shift, it's going to kick in automatically. So very, very straightforward. It just needs to be properly configured, which we are there to help out with. If ever this is a new feature that wasn't there during your implementation, don't be shy, contact our support or whoever we assign to you, and then we'll get on that together. But the qualification is really neat. And then of course, what we added here, and we'll see this in our other tabs in our settings, but we added filters in our settings. So if I wanted to see what qualifications I had active for my sales team, let's say I had a huge list of qualifications, I can just toggle on, show me everything that I have active for my sales team. And then I could get even more specific. Let's see the reps kind of thing. And then I'll know for a fact that these are the ones that are active for those. It's pretty neat. And then of course helps you with assigning shifts to the people that should get those shifts. I would like to say it's not really an HR feature though. It's very much to help you with the assignment of the schedules. So it's not really going to give you like those reminders like 3 months before the expiration date. Make sure that Jeremy renews his CPR license. It's really just to let you know that, hey, he's expired now because we got the update from an HR system, or just because we had the expiration date in and it's now passed. We can assign him, or if you want to assign him, make sure that he's getting his training done or whatever the case may be. So qualifications management right there. Pretty neat here. I don't know if everybody is aware for this one because it was recently updated. And the update was really just giving you access to modifying the statuses. So you could add your own customizable statuses now, which is really neat. Whatever you need for the names, of course, full-time, part-time, substitute. I think nowadays in new accounts, you don't even have any. We'll give you suggestions, but we let you create exactly what you need as a structure. And then of course, the code for payroll purposes or HRIS synchronization. So all very straightforward. Of course, I think as you see here, this is probably what a new account will look like. You'll have that full timer and then you'll be able to add and remove others. As simple as that. Our recruitment settings. So recruitment's a new feature from 2023, a new module, I should say. Is completely separate from scheduling or can be synchronized. So it's pretty much its own platform. How this will work really is just setting up your about your company page. So this is very much like when you apply for a job and you're just seeing a job description, but not only the job description itself, but about the company, a little bit of a deep dive on like their values, their culture and all that. So you could add your company URL, so that way when they go on the Evolia map to shop for shifts, they'll see and can be redirected to your company URL. Industry always helps, so that way they can use filters, so they can filter off by the industries they want to work with, filter the healthcare industry, then boom, they'll see all the jobs in that industry. And then about us, of course, mine's a demo account, so we didn't get fancy, but you can have that about the company description right here. Very straightforward. Next is our pre-screening questions. So of course, Evolia, our spin on recruitment is really unlocking the candidates that are qualified for you. So it's really not just like, you pay for a lump sum of CVs and the majority of these candidates are not qualified, not available, not interested. You're going to unlock or you're going to receive those candidates of people that are near your location, because it's all on a geo-tagged map. It's all interactive as well. So it's going to show candidates the jobs that are near them. Once they apply for it, it's not only just, hey, here's my CV, I'd like to work for you. We can also set pre-screening questions to make sure that before we unlock this new candidate, we're guaranteeing ourselves that they're qualified for our need. So the pre-screening questions, how they work, there are two different types of pre-screening questions. So if I just go and edit one of these, criminal record, let's just go for it. I'll edit the criminal record. How this works is that, of course, this is a custom field. Name it however you want. Okay, there's a job offer with it. I can't do it. I'll do it in that one. So I want to know if they have experience. We have suggestions, but once again, custom field. Go in English though. Do you have relevant work experience? As a boss, I'd like to put my ideal answer to yes. Could be no, doesn't really matter. And then, well, does matter, but in this example. And then afterwards, the two types of questions we'll have are the must-haves and the nice-to-haves. So it could be a nice to have relevant work experience, but it might not be the deal breaker. So, kind of thing, you kind of just structure your questions the way that you want it and how you'll filter your candidates. Of course, add as many as you need. And once that's saved, you'll have those pop up in the candidate application process. So they'll be able to trigger what was, or answer, hopefully, accordingly. And then afterwards, you'll have that nice percentage or a nice list of who answered how, and then you'll be able to decide who you're unlocking. So once again, this is more on the settings. There's going to be a recruitment webinar in the next weeks. I think it's either the next one or the one after that. So I don't want to dive too much into the visuals of that because we have still a lot of settings to go through. But basically, it's a very, very neat feature. It just makes sure that you're not just unlocking anybody, you're unlocking someone that's interested, that's close by, and that's qualified. So stay tuned for that next webinar on recruiting. We'll go over the pre-screening questions and that entire workflow. Publication settings, depending once again on if you use recruiting. So if you want to enable this by default, any open shift with a recurrence will not only be published internally, but will be published externally on our map, on the recruiting map. I've mentioned it quite a few times. I didn't want to do it, but I can't help myself. This is what I'm talking about. We will have a full webinar on this. So this is our recruiting map. How it works, of course, it's all geolocalized. So when candidates pop into their account, they'll have their postal code. It'll open exactly where they are and will show you jobs that are near. And then depending, and it might not be an English example there, sorry, I am in Quebec, but you'll see exactly what the user has put or the employer has put as information, job description, about the description of the company, stuff like that. If I would have an account, I could apply, answer those pre-screening questions if they have some, and submit my CV. So very, very brief intro. We're going to deep dive into this during a whole webinar, but this is what I'm referring to when I talk about recruiting. And of course, as I said here, if this is enabled, any shift that has a recurrence that's open will go into the job portal as well as on your personal, individual, internal job account. Sorry, the words are not coming out of my mouth there. So there you go. Next one is our spontaneous applications. So this might be useful for those that might not necessarily be hiring right away or for a need that's imminent, but you would like to have and receive CVs. So what you're seeing is the fact that these locations, of course, my account all inactive because it's a demo account, but if I were to have it active, candidates could see that I'm still accepting CVs that are called spontaneous applications. Feel free to apply, and if ever I am hiring, I might start unlocking candidates from that bank of CVs. So it's pretty straightforward. It's a lot less complicated than creating your own job offer. It's really just living there. I think I should be able to find some. Doesn't really matter at that point there, but basically it's really just showing you that, hey, we're not necessarily hiring right now. We might not have a need to fill right now, but we're open to receiving CVs so that when we are, we'll start looking into it, you know? That's a really good sign, actually. It's not showing you any spontaneous applications. It means the users are actually using us and publishing shifts and job offers. But all that to say is that if ever you want to have that like kind of on ice reception of CVs, you can have spontaneous applications. And of course, this is also backed up by your pre-screening questions. So even these can be filtered out by qualified versus not so qualified candidates. This is an important one because this will help you create your own traffic for candidates. It's really simple to explain. As you can see here, if I go on Evolia, the job portal, you have every single user's job offers on this website. This is a general job portal. I'll bring your attention to the banner that's up here. You know, it's in white. I see my logo here, but it's Evolia. It's obviously the general Evolia account. We offer a personalized job portal as well. So this can be put on your website. And then as candidates are looking for jobs or looking to join your team, they'll click on the link that will be on your website and it'll bring them to your white labeled version of the job board, basically. So I made it ugly on purpose. You can see that it's quite different. There's the red banner, it's not white. There are no shifts because I don't use recruiting on the demo account compared to all these shifts, right? So this is a way of funneling your own traffic to show them all the job offers you have active in your different locations, if that's the case. And of course, making sure you don't lose any potential candidates to other employers. So very neat there. If ever you have any interest when it comes to recruiting, please do not hesitate to contact us. We have specialists just for the recruiting side of the business that will help you optimize your postings and then explain the whole billing cycle and all that. So that's what we've got for recruitment. We've already gone through some of these, so it might be a quick glance at this tab. But our schedules settings, what will let you set basically a lot of display options, your start day, end day. So, you know, starting on Sunday, ending on Saturday, compared to Monday through Sunday, depending on the need. I personally like it this way. This is very important as well. So if ever a shift is going over the night, you know, spread over 2 days, how do you want it to show up? How do you want it to be displayed? The start day, end day on both days, depending on the need. And then of course, the default working hours, if ever you have, you know, a retail store that's only open from 8 to 10 or something like that, you can set those parameters or set the default shift that you would mainly use. So that way, every time you create a shift, they're already pre-selected. That's why when I create a shift for my staff, I have automatically the 9 to 5 that kicks in because that's just my standard shift, let's say. But it can be really up to you. It could be a 12-hour shift. It really doesn't matter. It's really just helping you from clicking every field every time. So if you have a default shift that you use the most, you can set this that way. And then same thing goes for default breaks. In that shift creation, if I would have scrolled down to the breaks and I would have added a break, I wouldn't have had to select the duration of that break. It would have been 30 minutes by default because of the setting. These two we went over. So replacement and swaps, it's really just the different features we have. Replacements is that delay, and just a reminder of the swaps, it's really just letting them swap within their max hours to avoid overtime, allowing swaps between different positions, and then making the swap based on the level of score. So, you know, 1 star and lower, or so on. And then once again, our permissions per team, position, location is accessible in this tab as well. I've been putting a lot of focus here because if you've noticed, the first 2 or 3 options only gave you division and team, but some settings will let you even create a set of rules per position, per location, and even per individual employee. So it's really cool feature, helpful in a lot of different cases when it comes to either union rules or just business rules, or that one ancient employee that has a crazy set of rules because it was agreed upon and grandfathered in. We can set him up completely aside to the others when it comes to the settings. So that's what we've got there. The work constraints will help you respect your employee's work-life balance. So limit worked hours in a day. You can make it a maximum of hours in a day. If ever you were trying to invite him to a shift that would make him go into, you know, his 9th or 10th hour, he's not going to be involved in the invitation list because it would not respect this. And afterwards, this is a neat one, depending on where you're situated. I think in Quebec, it's an absolute necessary to have like an 8-hour break between your shifts. You can have that set so that way, if ever you try to schedule Jeremy for that 6 a.m. shift, but he just finished at midnight, it's not going to work. Once again, colleague in a demo, maybe I'll save him from a little surprise. And then I don't want to get too redundant there, but add a new add a new constraint. You'll have it here as well. So team, position, location, they can all have different ones. This one's pretty neat. Budget tracking. Not all our users are actually aware of this. I meet with people that have been users for years, several months, and they weren't aware of this. But our budgets will let you set budgets per workforce costs or per hours planned. So how this works is very straightforward. If ever you want to set a limit of hours, let's say I don't want to go over 1,500 hours this week, specific period, or just general. The general budget would be a little weird, but basically over the next week, I want to make sure I don't go over that amount of hours. I'll make it from 1 week, one Sunday to the next. Super straightforward. If ever I get to a certain amount, I can make limit like I can have alerts, right? So if ever I get to like 80% of this, I'd like to get a notification. I'd like that notification to go to this supervisor and this administrator, type of thing. So really cool. It'll help you guys all be alert and help the whole team focus on the one goal and respecting that budget. And as we create shifts, if ever it were to like go over the budget, it's going to give you that flag, a warning saying, hey, are you really sure you want to, publish this shift? You're going to go at X number of hours over the budget, kind of thing. So really neat. Of course, we're sticking on hours here, but it can be on dollars as well. And then a budget can be set per team, position, location. Pretty straightforward. It's really just a question of popping in here and setting it up as you want it. And I think that's really the theme of the settings, right? Like it's a very intuitive application. It's really just following the steps. So read, understand, activate or disable. Really, really as simple as it gets. If ever there's a bit more of a complication, of course, we're there either in live chat or call or email us. We're always there to help out. So that's your budgets. Availability settings. Once again, I've said straightforward often enough this meeting, but it's a very straightforward setting. I'm actually going to use this opportunity to tweak this because every time I get into a demo, I can't change my availabilities. But you can set deadlines or just require approvals. We like to set both, so that way in our demonstrations, they can see everything. But very, very straightforward. If ever they go over the deadline, they can no longer change their availabilities. And you can always set notes too. So that way, hey, I'm doing my schedules for next month before the 15th of this month. Make sure to publish your availabilities, kind of thing. Just an example. Once again, add rule, can do it per team or division for this one. So that's what you got there for the schedule and availability. This one here, it can get very complex, so let's try to not lose anybody along the way with the explanation. But our invitation rules are something that will make us stand out from a lot of the different providers. This is what helps us respect different union rules, different business rules, just different ways of operating when it comes to finding the right employee for the right shift. How this will work, of course, you can set a default rule, just like the default times for the shift, default break times. Whenever I create an open shift, it'll by default go to all. You can always set it differently. So if ever the way you guys work is most experience, most seniority, by default, the invitation rule will always be this one when you create a shift. Let's just save it to all for this one. And then of course, if ever you want to force this rule, you force that rule and that way it won't be able to be changed. Very straightforward. And then as we're seeing here, different settings can apply to different teams. So you can set different default rules per different team. Very, very straightforward for that one. The reason why this is so straightforward is because this is like the invitation rules, the very basic invitation rules. This is offered in the free version. Everyone has access to the invitation rules. If we need, we can go a little bit further into this feature and have advanced invitation rules, which is something that's only offered in the paying version, right? So standard will be very, very straightforward. If I take an example here of my most senior first, something that's already built by default in the system, the way it's going to work, of course, give it a name, give it its level of priority. So being most senior first rule is going to go through seniority, most or least seniority. You can see the different options that are available. So you can go through score as we spoke of during the shift swaps, different little options there. The custom will let you create your own list. Scores once again, so if ever you want to make sure that, hey, the minimum required score is 3-star for this shift, you can have that set up. Ignore or consider schedule conflicts, and then the duration of the invitation phase. So every 5 minutes, it's going to go to the next invitation, or not specified. They're just all going to get it. So very, very straightforward when it comes to the basic invitation rule. It's really just how do we prioritize the invitations, and then if you want to delay, we can respect that, and then we can ignore conflicts. So not the most advanced feature there. Where we'll come in become, or where the system becomes a little bit more complex is in our advanced invitation rules. Sorry about that, guys. I need some water soon. But as you're seeing here, once again, the name, very classic, very standard. The next phase is the invitation phase. So the two phases really when it comes to this setting is, number one, how we invite, how we'll target the employees, how we'll communicate the shift that's offered to the employees. And then number two will be, once we have the list of people that are interested, how will we decide who gets assigned? So the system is there to help you automate either halfway or the full procedure of the assignment and the invitation. Brief explanation here. What we're doing is creating phases, right? So depending on the need, it can just be one phase or it can be 2 phases. An advanced rule will let you set that level of priority just like we saw in the regular rule. So if ever it's, once again, let's go with most senior first. We'll just give it a 5-minute delay, give them a chance to answer. And then in our advanced settings, we can tell the system to invite that exact position only, that exact team only, or that exact location only, or, you know, a fallback team. So that way, if ever we're really stuck and then nobody's answering the need with the exact criterias, it'll go to a fallback team. Maybe, you know, it's a different branch, but he's working in the same position, so he's qualified to work in this branch. So the system can automate this call out. Often enough, the first phase will be exactly what we need. Let's just say we're just taking, you know, only the full timers, for example. I'm just going to click away. And a couple others. I didn't want to scroll down. If ever you wanted to respect different things like the minimum hours per week, maximum hours per week, we can configure that as well. Same thing goes for pay periods. This is the same as what we saw earlier, so you can choose to ignore the schedule conflicts and or their availabilities. And then last but not least, in the first phase, how much time do we give before we go to the next phase? How much time are we giving these first candidates for the shift time to answer before we skip to the next phase? And then maybe we'll go to, you know, least worked hours or whatever the case may be, least experience or whatever the case is. Really, it's really, really up to the discretion of the user. Basically, it'll be set by their rules or their union rules. Let's just keep it to most seniority again. My eyes are betraying me. But then you could mention, you know, like maybe it's not just this position we need. If we're stuck, we'll go to a fallback position. And then instead of just the full timers, let's open it up. So it's really just a way of targeting the right employee at the right time, depending on your business rules. And then, of course, once we have that list of people that have raised their hand, showed us their interest, we can decide or tell the system from the people that are interested who should get the shift. So it's very much the same when it comes to the priority. We'll once again maybe signal out the seniority, and then maybe a second level of priority. If we go with the least hours worked, would be a smart way of going about it. So you'll go to the most senior that's got the least hours. You're going to be avoiding overtime. Just a very general example. And then the same thing goes here. Instead of being phases, it's groups. So within these levels of priorities, if my group 1, you find somebody that's exactly the criteria that I need, that person gets the shift. So the system can automate how we invite, and it can automate the assignment of the shift. Very, very neat, very, very powerful tool. Of course, this requires a lot of configuration, and that's why our team is there to help out. The last feature will literally just be, or the last toggle on will literally just be to tell the system how and when it'll react. So if there's a delay before the shift start or a delay after the shift publication, let's say 8 hours after I create the shift, I want you to start assigning, then it'll start assigning with the required, with the information it gets and the configuration it was given. So I didn't want to deep dive too much in there because I can, you know, ramble on about the invitation rules. If ever there's any need for this or any need to for help when it comes to tweaking these rules, do not hesitate contacting our team. We're there for that. So invitation rules, very important. employee mobility afterwards is basically what we were just talking about with fallback teams, right? So the first things first is really how it'll work. So if you want your fallback priority to go from team, position, location, you can make it go different ways. It's just the way our structure makes the most sense in my account. But if ever I find nobody that works in the same team, it might go to somebody that works in a different team in a different position. Let's just say that's kind of what works here. And then the managed fallback positions is basically letting you the system know that if I can't find anybody in my floor, the fallback position for floor is nursing, or the fallback team for floor is nursing. I'm in the team section. So it's very straightforward. It's literally just the configuration of, hey, if my administrative assistant can't make it and I can't find anybody that's qualified, who's my fallback position? Let's just say it's my advisor. So this is all stuff that we usually configure with you during implementation, but a really cool thing with Evolia is that you have full access to your settings, so you can change this up, tweak it around, update it if needed. So this is what I was mentioning earlier with the invitation rules, the same exact team, position, location, or the fallback team, this is where it comes from. Payroll management, so quick jump into here. What we're seeing is just the pay frequency. So yeah, the 4 options, weekly, bi-weekly, bi-monthly, and monthly. Set your first pay date, so that way it'll follow fluidly and once you've created your implementation or started your implementation. And then this kind of ties into how we had a feature for how it'll show visually. So if you have a night shift that goes over 2 days, you can set it for the start day, the end day, or on both days. More importantly, though, how will it react on your time entries, your time sheet, and then for payroll? So if ever a shift will be, let's say your pay period ends on Friday night, and then there's a shift that touches Friday evening and then Saturday morning, do you want those hours to be on the start or on the end of the shift? Quite straightforward. You have both options there. We're not going to go too crazy in detail in this one, especially that I see that we're getting close to the end of the webinar plan time. But we're gonna have, if it's, as I said earlier, if the recruiting isn't the next webinar, it's the next one after that, and the one that won't be recruiting will be on your time off categories. So we're gonna have a full webinar just on time off categories. To give you a brief explanation, a brief look at it, if I edit this vacation leave, the first thing, as we've seen in all of our settings, is the name. What's really neat about Evolia is that we can change the unit of measurement. It's not just because we can do so internally, we can convert it. So if it comes in from Bamboo HR in hours, we can keep it in hours or show it in cash or days to make the employees' lives easier. And then of course, the workday duration of that leave. So 7.5 hours. In my case, whatever your discretion will be, you will have that to your discretion. Sorry about that, not the right term. Anyway, what we got here afterwards is really just your icon. So this just makes it a lot more personalized. In your timesheets, you won't have to click on the umbrella to understand that the umbrella means a vacation day, compared to like the little virus here. We named it COVID, pretty funny. Obviously, if you see a virus, don't have to click on it. You'll understand it's a sick day. Paid or unpaid leave, and then we can set banks per team, position, location, and even individual members. So if ever a specific member has a specific time bank that nobody else has, we can have that set up. He'll be the only one that sees it. What really matters here is how we code them. So if I go, I'll skip this one. I'll go to the integrations. It's really just the earning code that is needed to be configured between either us and the payroll or HRS system, HRIS, the S is system, but HR systems. And as I said, the bank unit will have to be mentioned, and then however we want to show it is that first setting I had. So if it comes in cash, I could change it in days or whatever the case may be. Just a quick look at this one. You can set default reactions to the shift. So if ever a leave request impacts the shift or has a shift involved in that leave request, I don't want to have to think about it. If I approve that leave request, I want it to go in replacement automatically. So you can set it to do so. The other options would be to just ignore the shift, cancel the shift, or convert it into open, which is very similar to a replacement feature. Basically, it'll just look for the next qualified employee based on the invitation rule that you set it. And afterwards, really just the specific settings for that given time bank. So a vacation request, there's a delay of 15 days that needs to be respected. You try to pass one for tomorrow, it's not going to fly. And same thing goes for the different rules that can be set per different bank. So, approvals, Entering the leave value is something I suggest often, so that way it'll deduct as you approve instead of approving a value of 0 and then the bank doesn't adjust. This makes sure that that field is mandatory. Very, very brief explanation there, and brief for me is never that brief. I'm quite detail oriented, but we're going to have a full webinar on this one. Same thing goes here for premiums. Just to give you a quick glance at it though, we can create premiums that will be automatically added to the shift based on its configuration. So the different options for the calculation, fixed amounts, hours added, hourly rate multiplier, or just a rate bonus. Then of course the value, all customizable. If you need to include certain required hours for that premium, or if you want to lock that premium, you could do so. Integration code, very important, as I said, for the time banks. And then how this premium applies. So the first question is really just, is it live right now or on a specific date? I can tell that my business rules or my conventions, my union rules are going to change next month. I could set it in advance, or just live up. This is right now active. Is it a day of the week or a specific day of the year? And then as you're seeing, I picked the first one probably. So weekend, Saturday, Sunday, it's on. We can have time frames as well. So if it's a night shift premium, after 10 o'clock, it kicks in until 6 a.m. kind of thing. So all things that are configurable, any shift that touches these time frames will have this premium automatically. And then I can set it where it will react to a certain type of shift or employee status. And then once again, team, position, location. So if ever it's only set for my sales reps and I make this type of shift, Saturday from 11 to 4 for my warehousing team, well, they're not going to get the premium because it was only set for my sales reps. It would probably be vice versa. As I realized that the warehousing team would probably be overnight, but I think you get the gist. And then of course, this fancy little button will let it apply automatically or not. So it's quite a brief intro there. What's neat is going to be that full-on webinar on this. We're going to show you how it reacts, how it'll kick in automatically, and how you can add spontaneous premiums and such. Same thing goes for your overtime rules. We won't go too much into it, but once again, it will be applied to either a status, the team, position, location, or even individual members. And the overtime rules is really just the period of reference, daily, weekly, or by pay period, the amount that needs to be hit before that rule gets triggered, and then the same options as the premiums, the value that will be multiplied or added. We can bank overtime or include leave in this calculation. I'm hurrying up now just because of time. I don't want to keep you guys for your whole lunch break, but keep in mind this whole section, payroll and time off, there's going to be a webinar coming in. This is pretty quick. Web time clock is our first way of punching in. It's a physical location punch, all based on the web with Evolia, so there's no extra hardware. The employees can use their PIN numbers or the phone numbers on the account to punch in. If you need, we can also have photo validation. So at the end of the punch procedure, if you have a webcam or a front-facing camera on your tablet or Apple device, it'll take a quick selfie of the employee, and then you can see that, there is no buddy punch going on. Jeremy's punching in for Jeremy and not Sarah, let's say. That's punch option number 1. Punch option number 2 is our mobile time clock. Really neat because it has GPS validation. The reason why we need GPS validation is because it is on mobile, so people can punch in from wherever they are. Since we have that, we will then set the parameter. So you must set the radius that is the tolerated radius for the punch in. If ever they are outside of this radius, we can block any attempt or allow the attempt with a justification. So quite straightforward. If you have multiple locations, you set them all up. And then if anybody has a shift for location A and punches in the location B, the system is going to flag that for you. Just to go over these quickly, smart time clock settings. Depending on your need for smart adjustments, this is a page that will save you a lot of clicks, a lot of different exceptions or validations of different exceptions. This is basically just set to help the system understand your work parameters. So whatever work constraints you have, if you accept any tardies or if you have any paid tolerances, so like let's say you'll let them punch in 15 minutes before the start time that you had planned and you'd want to pay them for that 15 minutes. In restaurants, I get a lot of prep time. In manufacturing, I see this often as well. This can be set up so that way you don't have to go and add the 15 minutes extra or whatever 6-8 minutes extra that they worked. If it's within that time frame that you set, it'll be accepted. This is just a feature to display the salary in real time. This is going to save you a lot of time when it comes to the validation process with smart clocking adjustments, the roundups. If he punches in 2-3 minutes late, it's going to round up to the right time. So that way, any little tardy that we do tolerate will be automatically approved, will come in as a green punch in and not a yellow or a red punch in, which would be, red absence, yellow irregularity. Smart break adjustments, same thing goes. So if ever they punch in within that time frame, that little 3 minutes for their breaks, they're not going to cause any issues for the timesheets requiring any validations or approvals. And then these are really neat when it comes to the break times that we planned. If ever the employee forgets to punch it or doesn't punch the entirety of the break, either planned or either paid break or unpaid break, we can add them automatically. So very neat. Their 8 hours will always turn into 7.5 hours if that's what you need to see on your timesheets. And then as you're seeing here, the paid break is what I was just mentioning. So if they don't use their breaks, paid or unpaid, we can make sure that they are added on the shift. And then clocking rounding. So this, watch out if you have a clock rounding and a 3-minute roundup, they might be in consequence of each other, right? So basically now it's gonna round up every 5 minutes. So if I would punch it at 55, this 3-minute roundup wouldn't make sense. It'll never really round up. It's always gonna round up 5 minutes, right? So you gotta make sure that this kind of works together, not against each other. And it's either round down or round up or round. Very straightforward. And if ever there's some confusion there with how those two will interact, those two settings, once again, don't hesitate. Our support team is there for you. Irregular clock-in. So this is a case they either have consecutive shifts, as you see. So if ever they are like bartenders and they're doing double shifts, we don't want them to punch in, punch out, punch in, punch out. Ridiculous procedure. We'll have a consecutive punch in. So if ever their shifts are within 30 minutes of each other, an hour, or whatever the case may be, it'll clock him into the next shift. Pretty sweet. And afterwards, if ever there's tolerances between these consecutive pay shifts, just like the first feature, a paid tolerance can be added. And then this one right here was what I was mentioning. Employees cannot punch outside of the time clock zone. So if ever you want to make sure that there is no attempt, it blocks any attempt outside of your radius, we toggle this on, it's going to block them if they're not in the designated area. So this one here, if ever you would let them punch in beforehand, but only want to start paying them from the time you plan, you can allow them to punch in before the start time. If you have a tolerance, this is when you can make sure that they're paid for that extra time. If you don't want them to be paid for that extra time, then we don't set a tolerance. They'll be paid as of the time we planned. This, if ever you're in a big manufacturing plant and you have like 100 employees lining up to punch in on one tablet, you might want to disable the clock in issues questions. So that way they don't have to write a justification every time, because the first one that writes the justification might make the last one late, kind of thing. So just for efficiency purposes. And then once we got here, we had a setting for before the scheduled time. We have a setting for after the scheduled time. So if ever they work after the scheduled time, it'll allow it. Of course, it's not what you plan, so we'll send you a notification so you can adjust or approve the time entry. And then disable questions about your time clock issues. Same thing for the thing that we just spoke of when they're punching in but punching out. Break issues, all the same. So if you want to disable the questions, you can disable the questions, long story short. And then this one here, if ever your employee walks out and forgets to punch out, we can make sure that the shift closes after 12 hours to avoid any conflicts in the next shift for the next day. We have this feature here that was used mainly for COVID. If ever you need to create forms, contact either the CSM agent that we gave you or just our support, can create forms. So it could be like when they punch in, back in the day, it was super popular. They had to make sure that, I was not in contact with somebody with COVID. My temperature is XYZ. So this form was something that was used for them. Last but not least, because we won't go through the last two tabs, it's just your billing and your modules, but your timesheet approvals. So you can have approval reminders every week, every 2 weeks, and then you could set it where it's the Monday or Friday at the end of the week. You'd set a reminder for your management staff. If ever you need a second reminder, as you're seeing here, we'll send to the manager whose the timesheets are not validated. So it's really just keeping everybody on the same page. End of the period's coming up, you still haven't validated your timesheets, it's going to send notifications, and then you can set delay between your reminders. So you could be extra annoying or a little bit more on the macro level of management, but making sure people are doing their job. And then, of course, how they will be notified by push or by email. So I thank you all for bearing with me during this lengthy webinar. It is maybe not the most exciting and dynamic one since we're just going through all the settings, but it is an important one and it will be recorded. So if ever anyone missed parts, you will be able to find it on our website. Since we are at 12:09, I'll keep it open for like a minute or two if in case the remaining participants have questions, but if not, I'll send you guys on your way. Just give it one extra minute. As you guys are logging off, thank you again for your time today. Always a pleasure getting an hour of your time and going through our different modules and features. Start setting down. And this is gone. My question section is still on pop-up view. If ever anybody has anything, I'm still here. Give you guys a little bit more time. I think my last participant is no longer here. All right, so have a very good day.